Welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And this is really the podcast for the people who care about innovation, community, and the conversations around what makes Austin, Austin. So my name is Thom Singer. I've been doing this show for over 3 years, and today we have a great one. We've got a really smart guy. He's a professor at UT, and we're going to talk a little bit about, yes, that topic nobody's talking about. Okay, everybody's talking about AI, and he has worked on a very interesting study along with KPMG, and we're going to dive deep into that. But first, let's thank the sponsor of the podcast, and that is Calavista Software. You know, we couldn't do this show without community champion companies who help support the Austin Technology Council. And Calavista Software, since 2001, has been software development without the drama, and they are trusted by startups all the way up to Fortune 100s. So check out Calavista Software. And again, thank you to them for being a community champion. So today, our guest is Nick Hallman. Hey, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So Nick is a professor at the University of Texas. He teaches data analytics and Python to accounting students. I mean, this is riveting for me. You know, wow. No, I'm just kidding. He actually also does economics-based research for people in the auditing profession. He's lived here in Austin for 10 years. He came here for the job at UT, and he's married. He's got 2 kids, and also he is a competitive fencer, and he is going to probably make the national team for the World Cups in the over 40 division in fencing, which, Nick, tell me a little bit about how one gets into fencing.
Well, one is 9 years old and likes swords, and their parents want to put them into something productive as an outlet.
I guess that's better than the alternative if they don't put you into fencing.
There's only so many productive things you can do with swords at 9 years old. Fencing, competitive fencing is the one that I can think of.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your career. How does one go from being a 9-year-old, competitive fencer to being an economics professor at University of Texas?
Well, I was in undergrad trying to figure out what the best bang for my buck was in terms of degree. And I decided at that time that it was an accounting degree. So I got my accounting undergrad. I got my accounting master's. I went and worked for Deloitte for several years. And at some point I decided I was sort of done with the 80-hour work weeks and started looking around for something else to do. Decided to go back and get a PhD in accounting. And this is my first job out of grad school. So I was thrilled to get the job at UT. I love Austin. I love being here. It's a great city. And I've got the best job in the world. I love what I do.
Nice. And so
as boring as it may sound.
No, and I apologize for sort of making that joke when you started off with, wow, he teaches Python to accountants. That's exciting. So one of the things, let's talk about the research side of your business. I'm always interested not just in the professor side, because all of us who went to college, that's what we saw. But unless we were ourselves a researcher, we really didn't know exactly what the professors were doing behind the scenes. So let's talk a little bit about the research side, and then we'll get into this study.
Yeah. So I also, like many, when I was an undergrad, I didn't realize that there was this whole other side to being a professor. I went to grad school to get my PhD to become a professor, thinking that it was a teaching job. And I only learned sort of on the ground there in grad school that actually most of the job is not teaching, at least if you're at a sort of tier 1 research school like Texas. And it was just sort of pure luck that it turns out I love the research side of this job as well. I spend at least probably closer to 2/3 or maybe even 3/4 of my time and effort on the research part of this job.
So it's interesting for people who love it. My youngest daughter's boyfriend is getting a PhD in sort of environmental biology and phenology. And he absolutely loves the research. In fact, I think, he might end up as a professor, but I think if he could just find a way to do research on what he loves, he would do that forever. I mean, that is his jam, is that research. So you sort of fell into the research side and really liked it, right?
Yeah, it's great. And they're going to have to carry him out on a stretcher. I'll do research. I say all the time, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd keep writing papers. It's just so much fun.
Nice. So the world's changing a lot, and AI is kind of impacting everything. And you've completed this study now that's being released that you did alongside of KPMG. So tell us about this study.
Right. So KPMG, like most large service firms, including my alma mater, Deloitte, is in the throes of rolling out their flavor of LLM-based AI technology to their employees. And they are investing a lot of money in this technology, and they wanted a way to measure what the take-up was. Now, it's quite easy to actually measure, are people using it, and that's what they'd been doing for a long time. But it was becoming clear that that was not the best way to measure whether they were getting bang for their buck on their AI investment. Just how many conversations are people having is a pretty coarse measure of, are they doing good productive stuff with the technology that we're giving them access to? So KPMG came to McCombs at UT, said, we know you guys have researchers here. We would like to get some help if they're willing. And so some colleagues and I teamed up with KPMG. For us, it was a real opportunity to peer into a data set that not many people get to see, because KPMG, as part of this process, actually gave us all of the prompts for their people. So we got to see every time somebody at KPMG in this group that we studied submitted a prompt, we got to see that prompt. We got to see what the model's response was. We got to see how they reacted to that model response. We got the whole timeline over a course of, I think by the end of it, it was 8 or 9 months. So even labs like Anthropic or OpenAI, when they do this sort of work, it's usually on a much narrower time slice and not for a set of people that are doing it exclusively professionally. So this really gave us a window into AI use that nobody had tried looking through before.
Nice. And first of all, a big shout out to KPMG from my side. They have been for the last 3 years one of the original sponsors, and they continue to be for the Austin Tech Hall of Fame event, which comes up on May 19th this year. And so I couldn't be happier to praise KPMG, because they helped me get that program launched 3 years ago, and they're still involved. So little side shout out to your partner there, KPMG. So let's talk about this study. So you went in, you had access to all this data. You were looking at how essentially their analysts were using this. What are some of the things that you started to find that were surprising as you started, peering through all of this?
Yeah. So one of I guess I'd probably take off 2 or 3 surprising things from the data. One was just the narrowness of the use cases. So I expected, this is a very large, one of the world's largest professional service firms, and they have very smart, sophisticated people working there. And yet we honestly were seeing almost all of the use. The number's going to escape me, the exact number, but I'll be close when I say about 90% of the use is just help with writing. Just, I'm drafting an email and I want to make it sound slightly better, right? Not exactly cutting edge use. And so I think that sort of insight gets masked when you just look at how many times are our people using it, right? And now that they know, it presents an opportunity to go expose people to what those cutting edge, real game changing applications are for those people who are not at that margin.
So
another super. Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so if most people are just, I think most people are using it as a search engine personally, but it's most people are just using it. Hey, clean up my writing, which, by the way, I'm a writer and I love having it clean up my writing. My 8th grade English teacher told me I could never be a writer because I didn't have good grammar and good spelling. She didn't foresee, spell check and Grammarly or AI because, I'm a good writer, but now I'm a great writer because I have these tools. However, if most people are using it for that, if most people are using it for search engines, where are those, I forget the word you used, but those strategic uses, something you just said, what are those and what were you finding of the small slice of people who were using it for something better?
So this is moving forward a little bit, but one of the things that we identified as a sort of a flag of good, sophisticated use is giving a model, giving an LLM a task that is very well defined with a well-defined output that you want. So in some cases in the data that we saw, that might be an analysis, right? A full-fledged financial analysis. It might be help creating a slide deck. It might be help understanding how to write code for a particular use case. Now, the tools that we worked with, our data is a little bit dated at this point. So we're not talking about Claude Code, right? We're not talking about sort of agentic use in the time period that we were looking at. This was still in an era where there was a lot of, okay, I've got to do some sort of analysis. I want to write some Python code to do it. Help me write that code. I'm going to copy and paste that code over to my IDE and I'll run it there, right? And in that environment, it is super, super important that you're very explicit about what you want that code to do and what a good outcome would look like. And so one of the things we identified as sort of an indicator of good use is just how specific are you about what you want and what a good outcome will look like. But that frontier use case, that's stuff like coding, it's help with analysis, it's actually delivering some sort of work product, not just, take a paragraph and make it 10% better.
So I cut you off when I asked you sort of what surprised you. You were about to say another thing, and I went down that path. What was the other thing that surprised you?
Sure. Probably the most surprising thing to me, who went into this study thinking that adoption and sophisticated use was going to be highest at the sort of earliest ranks on the hierarchy at KPMG, is that we saw the opposite of that. Actually, the best, most sophisticated use was primarily among their senior ranks at KPMG. And it's not what we've got in the HBR study that you read is pretty descriptive. So it's not totally clear to us why that is. But if I'm speculating and, we may do some additional research on this, I think it's likely that it just happens that a lot of the same skill sets that make somebody a good user of an LLM are the same skill sets that make them good leaders at a firm, good delegators of task. Because honestly, the best way to delegate a task to a junior employee is to give them a super clear picture of what it is that they should be doing and what a good outcome would look like, so they know that they've gotten there. And that is exactly the same thing that you should be doing with an LLM. And so my own speculation here is that it's just this overlap between the skill sets of being a good delegator to people and being a good delegator to LLMs. That means that the senior ranks at KPMG are these good, sophisticated users of the technology.
Interesting. So I unbeknownst to me, my guess would have been the younger people, because I think that we think that the younger people are the ones, who are better at that. And you're finding that it's really the more senior people who are using it better. And I love the analogy of, because they're already good at managing teams, they'll be good at managing the LLM. So if it's more, experience brings more sophistication, what is it then that we can do to get the younger people to use it in sort of a more planned out, sophisticated way, so that, if we can get the lower people on the ranks being more efficient, that all trickles up as well, right? So what can we do to get the employees more actively using it for good?
Again, so this is a little bit speculative on my part. The study in HBR doesn't address that. It's an open question. And I expect to do more research specifically on this topic. But frankly, from anecdotal personal experience, practice, just use it a lot. Even if the outcomes seem bad at first, use it anyway, and then go, use some alternative afterwards, just to get hands-on practical experience. Because one of the things, and I as I mentioned at the top, or I think you did, I teach like a coding course to undergrads, and one of the pitfalls for them is they don't have a clear vision of what the frontier of what a model is capable of is. And so they're constantly oscillating between asking for too little, and asking for too much, and then being disappointed when the outcome is bad. And the only way, it's very difficult for me to communicate to you or anybody in words what that frontier looks like. Plus, it's constantly changing. The only way to really get comfortable with what the sort of sweet spot is on what you should be asking from this technology is use, just daily, frequent use, and you will build that understanding. And then once you're targeting your request at sort of the frontier of what the AI can actually provide, not overshooting, not under asking, it becomes a really powerful tool. I would be embarrassed to tell you the amount of AI I use in my daily life.
Well, there's been a lot of talk though over the last couple of years, and my observational experience is we're getting less of this, but around sort of what they were calling the hallucinations, AI making things up or encoding. It's doing the coding, but it's putting in ancillary too much stuff in the coding. I know a young person who works in sort of finance, and he does massive coding in the finance industry. And he says that they use AI, but they treat it like they've hired a junior coder, so they have to review everything. Yes. Or he says, we treat it like we've hired the best coder in our industry of all time, and he's on LSD. So at the end of the day, using it for sophisticated things like the coding, they still have to go through and read every line of code just to make sure it doesn't screw up because they're doing very sophisticated things. Do you still find that that's true, is that you can use it, but you dang well better not take its word for it?
Less and less so. So I find myself falling into a trap of it's been good and right the last 99 times that I used it. So maybe I can get a little lazy, and it's that one time that will bite you. But it's gone from 1 in 10 times it will bite you to 1 in 20 to 1 in 100.
Yeah.
So it is definitely very quickly improving on that front.
So you said up front that one of the ways KPMG and other companies, we're doing this is, and the way the other LLMs companies do this is they monitor how much usage there is. So if usage isn't the best way, to measure it, what should we be measuring to know that we're being effective?
Yeah. So what we do in the study is actually, it's very computationally intensive and expensive. We actually take all of these prompts, hundreds of thousands of conversations with LLMs, and we run each conversation. So user asks for something, the model responds, perhaps the user responds again. We take that whole conversation and we run it through an LLM that answers some questions for us about what's going on in that conversation. Things like what is the use case, right? We didn't read 100,000 of them. An LLM read 100,000 conversations and categorized, is this a writing task? Is this a coding task, et cetera? We asked for whether they're using explicit prompting strategies. So for a long time, and still, frankly, there were very specific things you could do when prompting a model, things like few shot prompting, where you give it a set of like examples of what good output looks like, so that then it can gauge its own output and make sure it's giving you what you want. We looked for examples of that sort of explicit strategy-based prompting, other stuff like that required us to actually have this corpus of data on the actual prompts that were being submitted, and then run them through a sort of a meta AI analysis. Very expensive, gave us some great insight. But one of the goals of this HBR study was to see if we could capture what's happening inside of those prompts, but with easier to measure, cheaper to measure, quicker to measure proxies. So some of the things we came up with that correlate very well with the really rich data that we saw from inside the prompts are just how many times does a user go back and forth with the model in their average conversation? If a user is asking for something, getting a response, and then they're out of there, that's usually a bad sign. A much better sign is that they ask for something, they get a response, they ask for tweaks, they ask for improvements, and they interact with the model iteratively 4 or 5 rounds to get that outcome. What we found is most of the time when somebody asks for something and then they get it and they take off, it's because they saw that first result was not great and they thought, oh, this model's trash. I can't use it for what I'm doing.
Interesting.
Right? And so then they just give up and they go do it manually.
So that's interesting. I would thought they would just grab what it was and use it. It turns out it wasn't a strong, final output, to be used. That's interesting that they just give up and do it manually. It's interesting when you talk about going back and forth 4 or 5 times, just again from, a layman. Early on, I was taught by a friend, and 3 years ago, I was using ChatGPT when it was like 3 weeks old. And he said, when you want it to do something, before you let it do its output, ask it to ask you 5 questions for clarification, and then ask it to ask those questions one at a time, not to ask the next one until you've answered, or else you'll get all the questions at once. And I found that, it's a little different than your back and forth continuously asking questions, but having it ask me 5 clarifying questions always makes the output of product just that much better.
Always.
So how much are people doing that?
So that is now, so just as an aside, you may have noticed in sort of more modern iterations of the models, that's often baked in. The AI labs are baking that behavior into the prompt, like the iterative behavior that you just get by default in the models. That was not the case by and large in the era that we studied. And we specifically looked for that. That was one of the prompting strategies that we looked for. And it was exceedingly rare. I don't have the statistics at hand, but we're talking like low single digit percentage cases where somebody was using that strategy.
So as we look at sort of managers trying to get people to use this, how should managers then really be looking at the usage and encouraging their people to do this? And how important is the prompts itself?
So the prompts themselves, your first go at a prompt is extremely important. It is getting less important as the AI labs are sort of learning what bad prompts look like and sort of preempting bad prompts by coaching their own models sort of behind the scenes about how to interpret a bad prompt sort of as a good one. But the first interaction with the model is probably the most important one. And so one of the things that we also looked for in our data was just how ambitious is the first ask in a prompt. And the more ambitious that first ask is, the sort of more detailed it is, the more characters are in that first prompt, which is the easy way to measure it. Just how long is the first prompt in characters, sort of the better the outcomes are. Yeah, so you looked like you were going to jump in.
I was going to say, I love the term when we're talking about, speaking to technology. Have an ambitious ask. What do you mean by an ambitious ask? I liked it when you said that.
So it's about being on that frontier that I was talking about earlier. Very often people under ask, and they're not asking for sort of something on the frontier of what the model can do. And if you are going to push that envelope and you're going to try and be on the frontier, it then becomes very important that you're extremely detailed in what you're asking for. And so, again, a lot of this HBR study was trying to boil down these super sophisticated, sometimes hard to measure concepts like ambition in a first prompt into something that everybody can measure for every prompt that their employees are sending to the models. And so the easiest way to boil that down into an easy to measure proxy was just turned out to be how long is your first prompt. Very long first prompts are usually indicative of asking for more of the model and being more detailed about how you ask for it, which is more likely to result in a good outcome. So I would encourage managers who are trying to get employees to adopt and be sophisticated users of this technology to have their employees be ambitious in what they ask for, but to also be detailed.
So every time we talk about AI, I always bring up sort of the human side of business, both in the way the human reacts and uses the thing, but also the fact that we're not forgetting, the human side of business. I do a speech called Human Interaction, HI, in an AI-driven world, because so many people, managers and everybody else, are looking, how can we get the most out of AI? How can we do this? And they're forgetting that there's humans who have to learn and grow and change with this. So who are you finding in the study? I mean, you said the managers, but is it the more tech-savvy people who are using these tools, or is it the less? And the reason I ask this is getting out of the tech world, in my world with professional speaker friends, the people who are tech savvy and speak on tech or have worked around tech are all using all kinds of tools. And the people who are not, a lot of them are anti using AI, or they use it on a very limited basis. They use it as a search engine. So what are we finding, when it comes to the humans, who is adopting to this the easiest?
So the way we break things down in the HBR study, although this might be some behind the scenes detail, actually, I don't know if this made this through to the published piece. We've got some data on sort of what department the people we study are in.
That makes sense.
So sort of interesting to us as accountants. All of the 3 UT researchers are primarily accounting researchers on this study. The accountants are really bad at this. They're just not using it that much. And when they do use it, it's not really very sophisticated. Interesting to us also, the marketing people were knocking it out of the park. They are really power users here.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that sort of breakdown is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
We're a little bit limited on what we can see in the data, but we can see where they sit in the organization, and the marketing people are killing it.
Interesting. That, well, I mean, a lot of, observational possible reasons come into that. So are there any personality traits that sort of come out of that then, as to who is going to be the more sophisticated, more ambitious user?
I wish we could have given everybody at KPMG a personality test and then correlated that with their AI use, but we didn't have that level of access, unfortunately.
So is there any risk that, when people hear of this research and they think, oh my God, you're just turning this into another checklist instead of, how they can actually use it to be better at their job? Is there any risk to sort of where we're headed with AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the case that what gets measured gets done, right? So actually our goal with this is to sort of move past that, because what I saw happening in a lot of places as a first pass at least, and then there was some risk that became steady state, is that people were, as we discussed from the top, people were just measuring like, all right, how many times are you actually interacting with this thing on a daily basis? So you would have metrics that were actually, in some cases, not necessarily at KPMG, but at companies I know of, like going into comp decisions, it was metrics like just what's your daily prompt count, right? Which is sort of a crazy way to measure this, and a very easily gamifiable way,
right,
to measure this behavior. And so one of the takeaways, my hope that one of the takeaways of the work that we've done here and will continue to do, is how can we be a little bit more careful about how we are measuring this, so that we're not just capturing volume, but we're capturing quality, and we're doing it in a way that's a little bit harder to just box check and gamify when it begins inevitably to enter things like bonus calculations.
Yeah. So stepping out of KPMG and out of the article and the study, how does all this that you found really impact the average professional, who feels like, oh my God, is AI going to take my job? Am I falling behind because I'm not there yet? Is there any findings for the average Joe?
I mean, the average Joe findings, I think, are the same as the people at KPMG or in other professional environments. Be ambitious, ask for more, use it more so that you understand what that frontier is, all the stuff that we've discussed. As far as job taking, it is a losing game to speculate on how that's going to go. I kind of hate it when people do it because nobody knows and they're just spouting off. The sort of trite thing that you hear all the time is that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who uses AI effectively is going to take your job.
Yep.
That might be true. I suspect it is, but I'm not really willing to speculate much past that because it's so hard to see into the future. Does
using AI repetitively make you worse at your job? Like you're not tweaking those brain skills if you're an accountant or whatever, if you're relying on AI all the time. I know, as a writer, I try not to let it write for me because I need to, it's like a muscle. I need to work that writing skill every day. I'll let it edit for me, but I don't want to let it come up with the ideas. Is that true in other jobs? I mean, is this going to dumb down people because we have all these great sophisticated tools?
It's like any other tool. It depends on what you're trying to do and how you use the tool. So what you just described to me is very good AI use, that you are interacting with an LLM. You're not outsourcing to an LLM. And this does not come from KPMG, to be clear, or any of the work we did there, but from just interacting with students, where I strongly encourage them. In fact, I give them tasks in class that would be absurd to ask of them if they were not using LLMs. So I basically mandate the use of LLMs in the class by just giving them tasks that are so hard that they really couldn't plausibly do it without. But those that outsource, they're not getting good outcomes, right? It's those that interact and interface and go back and forth with the model that get good outcomes.
So it's interesting as a teacher that you say this, because 3.5 years ago, when all this started, I had a college student, and their university issued a thing saying you better not be using this, and their university now is just like yours, encouraging them to use it and all this. So I mean, it's been a fast change from them saying you better not be using AI on your papers and your research, to 4 years later, major universities working it into the curriculum. How do you think it changed this fast?
I mean, the first reaction was a it was an obvious knee-jerk defensive reaction from a university. Of course, that's what they're going to say. But it very quickly became obvious that we were just going to get left behind as a profession if we didn't incorporate this into our curriculums. I remember, so I was teaching the same coding course. It was the first year I taught the coding course when ChatGPT dropped. I had given my students a take-home final, which was open book, open internet, do whatever you like to write this code. Just do it for yourself. Don't outsource it to another person. And a student, this is how I learned about it. I was sitting in an airport lounge when I learned about ChatGPT. The student emailed me and said, hey, you said open internet. We can do anything we want except talk to another person. This feels like talking to another person. Does this count? And so now, like, my class is totally different. It's a completely different class because I can ask so much more of my students. I take students who have never coded before, and by the end of the class, they are writing scripts that scrape Edgar and do textual analysis on financial statement filings, right? It would have been insane to ask them to do the sorts of things that they can now do in a single semester pre-AI. So for me, like, it's been nothing but a boon. I love being able to take students from zero to like something actually tangibly useful that they can do in the world. Over the course of one class and one semester, it's great. It's been a wild and awesome ride.
So you mentioned that, that your study, it's back several months and all that things are changing, so fast. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that either comes out of the study or comes out of your own, work since doing the study that people should be paying attention to when it comes to using AI in the workforce?
In the workforce in particular, it's inevitable, I think, that. So I'll say it this way. The models that KPMG gives their employees access to, they're off-the-shelf models, right? So it's the same ChatGPT, it's the same Claude, it's the same Gemini, it's the same Copilot that you and I can get access to ourselves if we want it. They've got some specialized tools where they've got a layer that sits on top of those off-the-shelf models to sort of guide that model through a specific set of tasks. And that's different from what we've studied. We studied just access to the off-the-shelf stuff. So I would not, to just regular people out there that are probably have this split use. They're using it at work and they're using it in their professional lives. The strategies are exactly the same, right? The things that you do in your personal life to make that technology the most useful tool that it can be for you personally are the exact same strategies that you're going to use at work. And you will become a better user of the technology at work and be more productive and sort of on these charts that companies are beginning to build of who are our AI use superstars, right? How do you become that superstar? It's through use, and that is use not just at work, it's use at home too. So strongly encourage people to just get more time in front. This is a weird thing to say because everybody's trying to get off screens, but get more time in front of the keyboard with an AI. Have fun with it. Go explore. The more comfortable you are with what responses look like for a given ask, the better off you're going to be, both at work and at home.
Nice. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being here on Austin Tech Connect. I'll give you one chance for any last word you want to share.
I've had a great time. This has been a lot of fun. Look for more to come. I think the relationship with KPMG is ongoing. We expect to do more research with them, so there'll be more to come on this.
Nice. Well, next time when you have part B of the survey, we'll bring you back to talk about what else you found.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Nice. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? Austin Tech Connect, we show up as one of the top Austin Tech podcasts, but that is only because of you. People who listen, people who share it with their coworkers, people who tell all their friends. So before you hit stop on this episode, think, who am I going to share this episode with? And make sure you forward it on to somebody else. And we're going to be back next week with another interview with somebody very interesting who's here in Austin, who's doing cool things that impacts our future. And again, thanks to Nick Hallman, professor at UT, for being with us today. Thanks to Calavista Software for being our sponsor. And we'll see you right back here next week on Austin Tech Connect.